if you told me at the beginning of the season, the Oilers are going to have a 13-game winning streak, where are they vis-a-vis the Canucks? 13 points back would not be my answer.
No.
And yet that's where they're at here. Vancouver 8-1-1 over the last 10 games, including a 6-4 victory over the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday, where they blow a 3-goal lead, a 3-0 lead. They give up the line's share of shots. Thatcher Demko has a just dreadful night, and yet still you won by 2 goals, and there wasn't an empty netter here either.
Yeah.
I mean, it sort of says it all with regards to everything has to go right for the Canucks at the beginning of the year. Everything is going right for the Vancouver Canucks.
They're passing a lot of tests, though, right? We talked about the 7-game road trip in its totality.
Mm-hmm.
What a challenge that was. You know, they go 5-1-1 on that. We've talked about the strength of schedule, especially on the road in that 7-game road trip. Well, they dealt with all that. They beat the toughest teams. They actually dropped points against the lesser teams, and they deal with a cauldron of emotion with Toronto as the visiting team at Rogers Arena, and what often goes along with that. Now, I think Canucks season ticket holders did their part in holding onto their tickets for that game.
A little better this year, yeah.
But there's still a lot of emotion and a lot of noise, and it was a night. It was a late afternoon that had some jam to it, and they passed that.
Did they ever? And in previous years, finding out that Carson Soucy is hurt for a 3rd time this season, and that head coach Rick Tocchet is talking about 5 to 6 weeks that he's going to miss. And of course, he has already missed chunks of the schedule already, got hurt back in training camp, got hurt again. This one sounds like a hand injury. You would hear that as a Canucks fan and go, Canuck luck, here we go. It's all going to unravel. And yet, I'm not sure there's much that can face them. It's a different defense lineup at Rogers Arena Monday morning in advance of the game against the Chicago Blackhawks. And of course, the Blackhawks minus North Vancouver's Connor Bedard, still recovering from that broken jaw. But Quinn Hughes lining up with Tyler Myers. We haven't seen him move off the Hughes-Hronek pairing, and yet here we are today. Ian Cole, of course, Noah Juulsen is going to slot into the lineup. So Ian Cole back on the left side with Noah Juulsen. And, of course, that middle pair now, Filip Hronek on the right side. And now we're going to get a chance to see him anchor his own pair, Blake, with Nikita Zadorov.
Yeah, so let's go through that all. We've always said Tyler Myers does not excel in an elevated role. He's best in a 3rd pair or limited, minutes 2nd pair. Here's the thing with my theory on that is that won't reveal itself for a while. So, and they've got the All-Star break and all that sort of thing. So I think they can certainly get through these 3 games till the All-Star break. And then coming out of that, there should be another few where I think Myers could probably handle the elevated minutes okay. Question would be after that. If Soucy's still not ready to go, middle of February, which it doesn't sound like it will be the case, do you start to see a degradation of his game there? Zadorov and Hronek. Okay, interesting. Both make loudish mistakes. We'll see if anybody changes their game a little bit there.
Yeah.
We saw Zadorov when he first arrived. There was not many swashbuckling jaunts up ice. I think he was playing it cool in front of his new coach and such. It had started to emerge. I wonder if he reins himself in just a little bit, knowing that things are a little bit different.
Say this about Tyler Myers. He has earned the promotion with what many are calling his signature moment as a Vancouver Canuck. Morgan Riley in a headlock punching at John Tavares at the end of that hockey game, which had some piss and vinegar in it. And we've seen a couple of those recently, a game against the Coyotes as well. I heard JT Miller talking about it in the postgame. Some of those wolf pack moments are not the worst thing for the Vancouver Canucks, given that you're on a prolonged audition here prior to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Dress rehearsal, I should say. With regards to the defense core, the other thing is this week's lineup of teams, the Blackhawks, and Jeff had it. Let me just see if I can pull that up here. Jeff had it with regards to how stripped down this team is, likely to have just 2 players in the lineup with 17 or more points. That's Jason Dickinson and Philip Kurashev. and then a St. Louis Blues team that is not exactly an offensive juggernaut, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. So if you're going to do some auditioning, as you say, this might be the spot. Okay, let's talk about Rick Tocchet, and then we'll get on to Nils Hoglander here and Conor Garland. Tocchet has now been the head coach of the Vancouver Canucks for 82 games, so a full regular season schedule. 51 wins, 23 losses, 8 results beyond regulation. That's 110 points since he took over for Bruce Boudreau. Max Domi, Leafs forward, had Tocchet in Arizona pregame Saturday. Listen to this. Probably one of the best coaches in the world right now. You watch these guys play, they're always ready to go. That's probably going to be our biggest test tonight in matching their intensity off the puck drop. He builds pretty special relationships with his players. He's awesome. I still talk to him every so often. Big fan of him as a human being. He helped me out a lot and showed me the ropes.
I think he has walked a very nice line of being old school and new school all at the same time. I think he for the most part communicates new school, as Domi points out. There's good relationships there. He's not full Pete Carroll, though, if you will. His very presence is a little imposing. Yep. So there's a respect level there, I think, from players of this imposing, not that they're fearing physical retribution, but you know what I mean? There's just that presence that sort of feels like, okay, he's the guy making decisions. And I think he's just got the whole room engaged. And it's also proof of concept, right? It's one thing for a coach to say, this is the right way to play, and you're hovering at 500. Because then you begin to look at the coach and go, is it the right way to play, though? When you say this is the right way to play, and you look at the standings and go, see, I told you, they go, the guy knows what he's talking about.
Well, and not only proof, I'm not necessarily sure players think this way because, for a player, if you've earned a Stanley Cup ring somewhere along the way, then you're a Stanley Cup champion, and you probably have some knowledge to impart. But we all, as fans of media, were sitting there going, okay, he's got this magic recipe way to play. How come it hasn't worked as a head coach? Now, granted, some tough spots in Tampa and Arizona. Give him a little better team and take a look at what he's achieving here.
Well, I don't remember anybody when he was on TNT. Up until the Canucks sniffing around, maybe I didn't hear anybody say, hey, when is somebody going to be plucking Tocchet off TV? Like, I didn't hear that. If it was said, maybe, but I didn't hear it.
A candidate. He wasn't the candidate for anyone except for this group. And Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin knew something that we didn't with regards to Rick Tocchet and his capacity as a head coach from his time as an assistant in Pittsburgh, where they won Stanley Cups under former Canucks assistant Mike Sullivan. J-Fresh Hockey, the Canucks spend more than 30 minutes per game with the lead. It's by far the most in the NHL. Another first goal on Saturday. J.D. Burke of Elite Prospects was tracking exactly how many minutes over the course of the year the Canucks have been in the lead in hockey games, and it's a staggering amount of time. And everybody complains. I shouldn't say everybody. There is a crowd that complains about the 4 p.m. starts when the Leafs come to town. Now, there's also a crowd that's like, yeah, game on. I'd much rather a 4 p.m. Saturday start. We've heard this a lot from Canucks fans with young families or people trying to get here from the island or the interior. 19 times they have played going back to 2004. Vancouver is 17-2 against the Leafs at Rogers Arena. And, of course, previously GM Place. 14 regulation wins, averaging 3.5 goals per game, giving up just a little more than 2, dominant on the power play, on the penalty kill, and plus 29 in those 19 outings against the Leafs. So really, this has been a house of horrors for the blue and white every time they've come out here, but 2.
Well, and even the visits to Toronto have gone pretty well for the most part over the last handful of years, even when they were bad. So yeah, I mean, it's not the imposing thing that that you'd think it would be, given the Leafs have had a very nice team over the last handful of years. Mm-hmm. But there's been a bugaboo here, and hey, it's a bit of a taste of their own medicine. Maybe it's the 3 time zones over sort of thing.
No, absolutely.
And the Canucks have to face that when they go the other direction.
Canucks with more with a multi-goal effort from the power play for the first time since that San Jose game, and you can almost really throw San Jose games out. That's not necessarily NHL competition these days, more an outlier. We had talked about, when's the power play going to get going? Well, it got going against
When are people going to realize that JT Miller to Pettersson pass is coming?
And Harman Dial, our buddy from Canucks Conversation and The Athletic, noting their penalty kill is 87.5% over the last month. It is third best in the league, tied with Carolina. So we're seeing progress in an area of the game that has long been a Canucks pitfall.
And it was better throughout the whole season, but only a little bit. Like it had gotten to league respectability, but it was still bottom of the middle, if you will, and it's starting to climb out of that position.
Nils Hoglander with a 2-goal game for the Vancouver Canucks. He is third on the team in even strength goals with 14 behind Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser, because of course he doesn't play power play. He does not have a power play goal, and I see JPAD and others are banging the drum to get him on a power play unit after this performance Saturday against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We had heard from Rick Tocchet last week that he's now finding it a lot easier to trust Nils Hoglander out there. And remember, we were talking about a guy who, I think Bruce Boudreau summed it up perfectly last year. If you're going to be a 30-goal plus guy, then I can deal with some of the defensive miscues. But unless you're that guy, you're going to have to learn the defensive side of the puck. Let's hear from Rick Tocchet on Saturday post-game about Nils Hoglander coming off a pair of goals.
Hoggy was like, I mean, that second goal, what a shot. So he spent a lot of time, Hoggy, in the video room. And he's working at practice a lot. And you can see it's paying off for him. That's what I love, that he's getting rewarded for his hard work.
Love to hear that. And a kid who wants to be better.
We wondered a little bit about this when he struggled. So he has the fabulous debut in the weird season, the North Division season. And then the subsequent games that we saw him, we wondered about this because it just seemed not necessarily the desire was the problem, but like where was the abundance of energy? Like it didn't seem like it was focused in the right places. And that surprised me based on the character that he is. Like you knew that this season was in him somehow, that this effort was in him, not necessarily the bottom line, but I knew this effort was in him. And it just wasn't there for the eye test. And now it has all come together. Like whether or not he deserves 14 goals in the season, I don't know. The shooting percentage is high there too. But again, good things happen to those that are doing the work.
Well, what surprised me even earlier this year is for a guy who's that pugnacious that he would just disappear.
That's the thing. It didn't make sense.
Like you'd go long stretches of the game without even hearing his name called, or that you would go a couple of games without him doing a whole lot. And we've had the conversation several times this year, once with our buddy David Quadrelli of Canucks Army and Canucks Conversation. Is he done being a healthy scratch? I think we can now say he's done being a healthy scratch.
Yeah.
But it has been a 2-step forward, 1 step back line of progression with Nils Hoglander. And look, now the Canucks have a very big decision to make, because he's going to be a guy that other teams are asking about as we get into trade deadline season and negotiations for either one of the plum rentals like an Elias Lindholm, a Jake Gensel, or perhaps even somebody with some term. And, many have cited chemistry as something they're a little worried about, that they want the Canucks to go out, fortify, get better for the Stanley Cup playoff run, but they don't want to see that at the expense of team chemistry. And I think you can put Nils Hoglander squarely in the middle of team chemistry.
If this was a contract year for Höglander, I would be less concerned about this, because he could be a 20-goal scorer by the end of it. What does that bump him up to? Is he a $4 million player if he gets to 20 goals in the new economy? He's got another year of 1.1, man.
No, I know.
It's exactly what the team needs. Yep. Production from somebody at or near the bottom of the pay scale. I mean, he's exactly what they need next season. They need a few Nils Hoglanders. They need Vasily Podkolzin to be a Nils Hoglander next year. So to get rid of one of those low-cost guys, boy, that would hurt.
And the other thing that's happened here is we used to lump Nils Hoglander into a grouping with his fellow young wingers or inexperienced wingers, Andrei Kuzmenko and Vasily Podkolzin. He has separated from that group.
And who'd have thought we'd say that after Kuzmenko's season last year? Right. But that's where we find ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Conor Garland. That's where we're going next. Conor Garland with a 3-point effort, the game's first star. And what I love about this Garland story, beyond the trade request that wasn't a trade request or whatever it was on the eve of the season. A similar storyline there to Brock Besser about, the trades he didn't make. But what I love about Garland is that we recognized for a long time that line of his, and now it's Teddy Bluger and Dakota Joshua. Earlier in the season was a little bit different when Bluger was out missing, was doing a lot of good things, but not getting the results. And every coach you've ever had will tell you, right? When you do the right things out there, eventually the just desserts will come. Well, Conor Garland is finally getting some just desserts here with the Vancouver Canucks, because for a while there, it was like, yeah, he's playing well, but they just don't have any production. He is up to 8 goals and 16 assists for 24 points. Here's Coach Tocchet on Garland.
That line's, the last 2 months they've won us some games. They're a line that's connected a lot. I hate to say it, but they're a system line. They're in spots that we want them to be in, and they're getting rewarded. Conor Garland's, he was terrific tonight again. He's had a hell of a year for us. Really proud of that guy, from start of the year. But he's done a great job.
I don't want to give too much credit to the coach because the players ultimately carry out the plays. But I think the coach saw the tools that all 3 guys bring to the table and said, this is how we want you to play. Well, and they're doing it perfectly.
And I understand why he hesitated to call them a system line, because some might take that pejoratively. I don't think so. No. To me, that's a compliment. Tocchet is a specific way they want to play. And these 3 guys follow it to the letter.
Yeah.
And that's why they've effectively become the Vancouver Canucks second line.
From production standpoint, yeah. Maybe not from a beauty standpoint. No. It's a funny line to watch.
Look, we can and will have the conversation about whether that's good enough as a second line to make a deep Stanley Cup playoff run. For the here and now, and watching these guys individually get rewarded, because with Joshua at the game winner against Arizona last week, this is a coach's dream. This is the thing you hold up as an example as you go down your coaching career about, I had this line in Vancouver, these 3 guys, kind of misfits. The right winger, we had tried with every centerman possible. The center was more a 4th or 5th line guy in Vegas. The left winger was a free agent that not a lot of people were in on.
Almost AHL guy.
No, exactly. And they've come together.
And if you looked at them and said, which one's the puck retrieval guy? You probably go to Joshua and say, hey, he's the guy with the size.
That's the itty bitty guy.
Who'd have thought that it'd be Conor Garland going into the corners and stealing wallets? It's unbelievable to watch him go into the corner. And it feels like it's with 98% success that he comes away with the puck, and you can see the players almost, how did he do that? And the truth is, I don't know, but it's nobody's wise to it yet.
Moving on, and the big news Friday for the Vancouver Canucks was the 3-year contract extension for President of Hockey Operations, Jim Rutherford. We heard from Rutherford. We heard from Canucks chairman Francesco Aquilini at the podium as this news was announced. We did hear from Elias Pettersson briefly after practice, but a couple of follow-up remarks from both gentlemen that I wanted to get to. Rutherford did a round of interviews. He went on 650. He was asked about playing out the Pettersson scenario because, of course, this is the management group that will tell you, he's not a UFA, he's an RFA, he's still under club control. We have 2 more years. All those things technically true. In reality, you need a deal done by the draft. And he was asked about, if worst comes to worst, having to make a trade. He said it would be too big a trade to make before the deadline. And needless to say, why would you
break this wagon up? Yeah.
But he brought up the notion of trading him in the summer. And you do wonder how that lands with Elias. We were already saying last week and reminded that Elliot Friedman said, look, I think the Canucks have messaged here for the benefit of their fans and are probably best served to shut up on this right now and say no more. So that I thought pretty interesting. Good honesty on Rutherford. That is absolutely the process that is going to happen here, that if Elias Pettersson will not commit to you whenever your season ends and you get to the draft, then you have to wonder if this guy's just in for this next year, do we have to make a move there? And then Pettersson after practice, and this comment didn't get as much run as the wait until the end of the year. He reiterating that he didn't want to talk contract right now. He was asked if he is happy on how things have improved under Rutherford. His quote was, "Yeah, of course. I think it shows for itself where we are in the standings, all the renovations at the rink, and just become a really professional hockey club. And the culture has changed." Now, that could be benign, and it is a second language. But when he talks about the renovations at the rink in a sentence with a really professional hockey club and the culture changing, it sounds like he went into the season skeptical and going, this whole organization, top to bottom, needs to make some vast improvements. And that's how I read it.
And a lot of people, like, there's two ways to interpret that he's tracking it all the way back to previous coaches and previous management, and that it wasn't professional, or he's talking about the first impression of this management group, which is the dismissal of Bruce Boudreau and how poorly that went, in addition to an older rink and all the renovations,
which were delayed and really screwed up, in fact, the last couple of training camps and preseasons.
It's hard to know exactly what he's pointing to as that was unprofessional. But it's through the clouds now. Like, he's obviously feeling, and I have to say this, like, I don't like what's the optics of a lot that's happening right now with him. And yet you would think if he was dismayed with this organization and looking to move on, God,
that would have leaked out.
I think it would have leaked into his play. Like, I don't know that you can be disillusioned with your job and yet show up every day and be that freaking good.
Yeah.
Like, that, to me, that takes a guy who's got a long-term investment, I would think. Yeah.
Well, we may well still be in a show me, prove it to me state for the Vancouver Canucks with Elias Pettersson. Rutherford adding, incidentally, on Friday, there's not a lot of players on the roster that they're looking to change or replace at this point. He talked about if they're getting an impact player, they would consider moving the first round pick, and said that they may in fact have to move a good prospect in certain deals. It sounds to me like the first rounder is all but traded.
I would think there's no heartstrings attached to it for anybody. It'll be a late first rounder. I think it is a fait accompli. It is gone. Yes.
All-star game where Quinn Hughes is going to partner with his brother Jack as captains of a team that involves Vancouver's Michael Bublé. And don't believe all the things you're reading about Bublé on those terrible ads on Twitter. He's the new Mary Berg. They're trying to get at Bublé now.
The poor guy, the AI photos that they've got of him.
Exactly.
Like, what did they type into the AI generator? Crying, ugly Michael Bublé? Because that's what they got. It's terrible.
We mentioned this last week that the league is going to try and bring some sizzle with some star power hockey fans and bring them and get them involved into the all-star selections, team selections. Justin Bieber is going to partner with Austin Matthews. They're big bros in Toronto. Of course, that's where the game is. Connor McDavid and Will Arnett, who the NHL seems to turn to at every big event, knowing he's a big hockey fan. And then Nathan McKinnon with Tate McRae, a YouTuber.
Yeah, influencer, right? Yeah, I mean, my daughters know who he is.
And Quinn Hughes also going to the skills competition as well at All-Star Game.
He's sinking his teeth into it.
Which should be fun. Oilers have won 13 consecutive games. The NHL record is 17. The next 4 games for Edmonton: Columbus, Chicago.
Oh, my God.
And then we get some meat on the bone. Sydney and the Penguins.
Oof.
They would be 1 away from tying the record.
Where is that?
Not on Sydney's
is that still
watch.
at home?
I don't know. I'll get to it.
Okay.
And then the game to tie, should they win those 3, would be against Vegas.
Oh, man. So they're going to earn the streak if they get there.
Oh, hell yeah. And of course, Vegas, a team that bounced them in the Stanley Cup playoffs last year. That was a terrific series until Edmonton had a lapse. I want to say it was second period of game 6 and couldn't recover from there. Could have been game 5. And of course, Sydney is not going to want this on his watch.
Errors and
right?
omissions.
What?
Alas, no, it's not Sydney. It's Nashville.
Oh,
You had the P team, but it's the Predators.
Oh,
yeah.
I took it from a Edmonton reporter.
Oh, unless Google's got it wrong, which it wouldn't be the first time that Google got it wrong.
I had Columbus, Chicago, Pittsburgh, and Vegas.
Yeah, it does end on Vegas, so that game stays. I've got the Predators here, so. But okay. I mean, still a playoff team, still a tough out, you know. So we will see.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's an incredible story. 13 straight wins.
Yeah. I can remember years ago being dispatched from my post here with the Globe and Mail down to San Jose when the Sharks were on like a 12 or 13 game streak and getting a chance at that time to talk to Ron Wilson was the head coach, Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau, about everything that goes into a streak like that. It's really difficult to do. And yet, as we talked about earlier, they picked up 1 point on the Canucks in that span. It's truly extraordinary. Speaking of BC and Alberta, you know how we talked or at least observed a little bit of this reordering of college football with the super conferences and teams like Washington and Oregon joining a conference that's based in the Midwest? Well, how about that same philosophy happening in Junior A hockey? 5 AJHL teams joining the BCHL for next year. Spruce Grove, Sherwood Park, Brooks, Blackfelds, and Okotoks.
The big ones.
Like the brand name that's ones. It.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. The super conference is coming to Junior A hockey. And really, when these 5 join the BCHL, there may be other leagues that call themselves Junior A hockey, but they'll effectively be Junior B hockey, given the power that you'll have with the existing BCHL clubs and then these 5 cherry-picked AJHL clubs.
It'll be very interesting. I mean, it's a bold move by the BCHL.
And of course, this is breaking away with Hockey Canada. These clubs would be, and you'd have to think something resolves there at some point.
The question is, without the backing of Hockey Canada, does a potential prospect, although if they're going NCAA hockey anyway, do they care about the opinion of Hockey Canada?
That's right.
But it'll be interesting to see because there's already that conspiracy theory. We've seen this, and we've seen it in practice to some degree, that the junior player that goes to the NCAA maybe doesn't get that World Junior asked, isn't asked to the U18 because they've sort of turned their back on Hockey Canada. Well, now it's going to be absolutely turning their back on Hockey Canada, and at an earlier age by going to this independent/Junior A league. Are you going to get a prospect? It's like I'm not going to risk not going to the U18s and the World Juniors. I'm going to go somewhere else. But
the other thing about it is that it should theoretically increase the level of competition. If you're a Canadian kid thinking of going the NCAA route, we've already seen the BCHL import a number of kids from back east, and particularly Ontario.
Legacy NHL players too, right? Plenty.
The burden of travel isn't too much because they're all in Alberta. You're not trying to be a pan-Canadian league or even really a regional league. It's a 2-province league, and you can structure the schedule accordingly. So, boy, we knew Chris Hebb had some big ideas when he took over the BCHL, and it is coming to fruition. A couple more things to note here before we move on. Our old buddy Bo Horvat made it a successful debut for Patrick Roy behind the New York Islanders bench. Horvat scores, the Islanders win. Adam Henrique, deadline target potentially with a couple of goals for Anaheim Sunday night. He's up to 14. I'm glad to see St. Patrick back in the National Hockey.
Yeah.
The league is so much more fun with St. Patrick. He is such a character, incredible player, of course, but a grand character of the game. A little surprised to hear it was the Islanders. I thought his next landing spot might be back home with the Montreal Canadiens or just down the highway with the Ottawa Senators.
I thought it'd be a flimsy president that brings him in and just sort of says, you do it. I'll just be here. There's a couple of opinions swirling around the Islanders organization.
Lou Lamoriello and his son.
Yeah.
In the upper management. We'll see if this is only going to be coaching, because that was one of the things we heard about Patrick, is he wanted a chance to pick some of the groceries if he was doing the cooking.
Mm-hmm.
But great to have him back in the league and visiting coaches. You have been warned that glass partition between the benches, it can be moved.
Yeah, it's a suggestion. It's not an actual division.
If he gets really upset and starts slapping on the glass, just be forewarned, it might move, as we saw here with St. Patrick. Listen, this is a beginning of a new era here on Sekeres and Price. We are live. on YouTube. We'll do it live. We, of course, did live shows forever back in our radio day. When we started in April 2021, we did a live stream of Sekeres and Price, and we're back to being live here. Now, look, it's not going to be the entirety of the show. In fact, the podcast will be out daily about 1 o'clock, and will include second guests, hashtags, some of the other features to the people we go and we do to the people. So the podcast will be out about 1 p.m. daily with all the features that you know from the Sekeres and Price show. But the opening block and the first guest are going to be live on YouTube going forward. Looking forward.
Absolutely. And thank you for the feedback already. We see a bunch of you chiming in on YouTube, and it looks great. And we'll, throughout the course of this new venture live, we'll bring in some of your comments.
So as we get to the menu here, coming up is John Shannon. And after that, we'll do some hashtags. Michael Del Zotto, former Vancouver Canuck, also join us. We'll talk about the NFL divisional playoff weekend.
Hey, gang, if you're finding yourself a little directionless without purpose on a game night, may I recommend Greta. It's a great spot to catch the game throughout the season. They're at 50 West Cordova, so you're on foot. You're just walking to and from the game. It's a lot of fun. It's a go-to spot for food, drink specials, and fun before and after the game. They do have specials every day. They've got all-day happy hour on Wednesdays, and they've got all those arcade games to keep you busy as well. So make it a fun game night at 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar and Grill, and visit them at gretabar.com.
Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great. With John Shannon, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast, the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, kindly agreed to join us here on a Monday, typically on Tuesdays. How are you?
I'm great. Monday's a good day for me. Actually, every day's a great day for me.
It's you are as easy as any guest we've ever had here on Sekeres and Price with regards to the scheduling.
Well, and the reality is I've been in the other seat.
That's it. It does tend to make you a little more facile.
He's easy like Monday morning. Is that what you're saying?
I do have some empathy for scheduling.
What did you make of the hockey game Saturday night?
Well, the tale of two periods, and then the better team won out. So, I mean, it shouldn't surprise us. Both teams have high octane offenses. And in many ways, I think that it took a lot for the Maple Leafs to get back to the tie game, and then they had nothing left for the rest of the game. But the Canucks looked impressive, and it's the depth again, guys. When you're getting, Garland and Höglander as your goal scorers, that's a really important aspect. And regular season, but as you look towards the playoffs, the depth is going to mean a huge amount of success.
Canucks are getting criticized. The Canucks are getting criticized for not beating good teams. For a lot of that was just the schedule. They just, for a long time, just didn't have a long run of contenders to deal with. With that road trip and beating Devils, Rangers, Islanders, Penguins, and now the Leafs, can that be put to rest just a little bit, that this team can actually beat good teams?
Listen, I think it could have been put to rest even if they didn't beat good teams, because I've watched Chicago play 5 times in the last 3 weeks, and they scare you all the time. They scare you. And every once in a while they come up and win. And every team anybody can beat anybody in this league at any time. I mean, as we talked about last week, I mean, the Canucks were a bonus to get a point out of Columbus the way they did. This is a tough league. And every time you think, well, we got 3 games against inferior talent, you watch. One of them will come up and bite you. So I think the Canucks have been impressive from opening night, and they continue to be impressive, and they continue to be somebody that a lot of people around the NHL are talking about.
How concerned should they be with the Edmonton Oilers and what is happening in northern Alberta these days?
Well, the good news is I don't think they'll meet them in the first round.
No.
I don't think the Oilers will be a wild card after all. But man, oh man, what is happening at Edmonton is truly amazing. Now, I think you could make the same complaint Blake, about their schedule of their 13 games. There's a lot of teams below them in the standings, but they did win the games, and they did take advantage of situations. What the Oilers are able to do now is to manage any type of adversity really well. Down 2-0, down 1-0, coming from behind is not an issue for them. Simply, they stay with the game plan that Chris Knobloch and Paul Coffey have put in place, and they're getting great goaltending from Stu Skinner.
You mentioned the Canucks scoring depth. Nils Hoglander had been a player talked about in trade rumors, because if the Canucks are going to get a big piece, they need to give something up. Would you move him? Is he too important to them?
Well, what are you getting back?
Well, I mean, so the top of the heap guys like the Lindholms, the Gensels, maybe a guy with term,
yes,
something like that.
Yes, I'm giving him up.
Yes,
even for a rental.
Even for a rental.
Yeah.
Even for a rental. I mean, this could be the Canucks year. This could be it. And the one thing about what those guys, Rutherford and Alvin, do is they play for now. They play to win now. And it was the same philosophy they had in Pittsburgh. They would do anything to surround Crosby, Malkin, Letang with really quality people in order to win Stanley Cups, which they did. And so I don't see at this point, with the success of the Vancouver Canucks, with the talent on the Vancouver Canucks, I just don't see Patrick and Jimmy changing that philosophy.
Is there a distinction, though, John, because those players you just named and the Pittsburgh team they inherited, I mean, I guess Alvin was there, but that Rutherford inherited, that was a playoff season, previous Stanley Cup winner. This is nothing of the sort. That doesn't change the calculus for you? Or you don't think that'll change the calculus for them?
No, because I think that, with Rutherford signing his extension, he didn't sign a 10-year deal. He signed a 3-year deal. So that means he expects to win in the next 3 years. And so why not now? I really do think that question, with everything that is going on in the National Hockey League, has to be for a lot of teams, including the Canucks, is why not now? It's a tremendous opportunity to take this team a long way in the playoffs.
What does the Carson Soucy injury do too? Does that, I mean, we've been predicting the early strike for a long time. Does the injury expedite that even more? Does it mean it happens even before the break?
No. I mean, I do think that now they can be a little patient at this time of year. What I do, you have to wonder. I still think that if the Canucks are going to go out at the deadline, which is still a long way away, guys, depth defensemen are going to be at or near the top of the list. Sure, you'd like another center, but at or near the top of the list has to be another defenseman. And so that's the one thing that I would suggest, that if the Soucy situation is as bad as some people think it might be, then you have to go out and get some more depth on the blue line.
Rick Tocchet, I'm not sure if you caught Max Domi's comments on Saturday, and Domi, of course, had him with the Arizona Coyotes, but he talked about how he's one of the best coaches in the world.
Wow. Right
now. Did you hear anybody around the NHL, speaking of Tocchet, in these sorts of with this sort of language, like when he was on the TNT set and he was working in media? Did you get the sense that this was just a twice failed NHL head coach who may get another opportunity? Did you see any of this coming from Rick Tocchet, head coach?
This greatness? No, I'll be honest, I didn't. He was always on everybody's list. When you said, name me 5 guys that aren't coaching right now that should get another chance, Rick Tocchet was on that list. That said, there were teams that passed him by. There were teams that, interviewed him and didn't hire him, or just didn't interview him. So from that perspective, it wasn't as if he was, a Jack Adams Trophy winner, Stanley Cup winner, that was going to inevitably get back into the game. It took the right situation. It took familiarity. The Pittsburgh connection again. It's going to be a drinking game soon, isn't it? The Pittsburgh connection again was a huge, huge assist to Tocchet being the right guy in Vancouver. And I do think, and I know I look at television maybe differently than most people, I do think his time away from the game, being able to watch a lot of hockey and seeing things and watching trends, I do think that was a great assist to him to become the coach he is now. The best example of that to me, Scotty Bowman. Scotty Bowman joined Hockey Night for 4 years and then went back to becoming a player personnel guy with the Penguins and then eventually to coach and then to Detroit. And he was a much different and better coach at those periods of time than he was being the arbiter and a very tough one in Montreal.
Well, and it's a great point, John, because when you're coaching your own team, you were so hyper-focused on the one team and the micro details, whereas if you do serve in the analyst role, you get the macro across the league, and it can be quite instructive.
Matt, you that is really a salient point. So many people now.
Doesn't make many of them. But, yeah.
Well, it's early in the week. So many people now, when they are with their teams, all they see is 82 games. They don't see the 1,300 that are played and how things are different with other clubs. This takes me back to a time when John Davidson, who's now the president in Columbus, was the lead broadcaster in both countries, in my mind, for years and years and years. And he would get phone calls from managers and coaches saying, "What's going on? What's going on with this team? What's going on with that team?" And because as a broadcaster, he had a book on every team in the league. And so he had knowledge of every team in the league. And I remember talking to him about 2 years into his time in St. Louis. I'm saying, "Boy, did you watch that game last night?" He said, "No, I'm too worried about the Blues at that point. He was too worried about his own team." And, part of the success of understanding how this game is played is to understand the whole league.
Speaking of former presidents, the former Penguins president, take a shot, Jim Rutherford, signs his extension late last week. How much did that surprise you? And the chances that he sees this through to the end? I mean, if they win the cup this year, does he actually change the plan, or do you think he sees it through?
No, because he'll want to win too. I know him. You got to know him. You got to know him. He'll want to win too, just like he did in Take a Shot, Pittsburgh. It didn't surprise me. He told a lot of us very cryptically before Christmas that an extension was coming, and it was just a matter of time. And and I think what had changed was not his commitment to Vancouver, but his belief in Vancouver as a city and what a great place it is to be around. That's the one thing that I think changed, and so to me it's a double commitment. It's a commitment by the Aquilinis to Jim, and I think it's Jim to the city and to the fans and to the franchise.
I'm just glad they're done playing the Penguins this year. We might have some alcohol problems. Actually, they don't. Sorry, my bad. They play the Penguins next month here at Rogers Arena. Dear God, John, we're all going to be luscious by the end of February. Hey, just out of curiosity's sake, and not that it really matters, because I think most people found the game. Although my mother, who was of a certain age, said, "How come the Canucks and Leafs aren't on the CBC on Saturday? Why was that in a Sportsnet game with the CBC taking the Habs and Bruins?"
I don't know. That's a good question. That's a distribution issue for our friends at Rogers who make that up. I suspect that in the end, the CBC, even though it's in more homes, is just a piece of real estate to Rogers. And if you're trying to put a stake in the ground for your own properties, you better put Toronto and Vancouver on Sportsnet.
Yeah,
there's some logic to it. I mean, it's funny now. I don't even, as a consumer, it doesn't even faze me anymore.
I don't even look at CBC.
I don't draw the distinction either. But of course, there's a lot of ingrained people in this country who go to the
But on
CBC
Saturday evening
at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern for their.
Listen, it's not a bad thing. Even from optics, what I would tell you is somebody again who scheduling and planning, it's not a bad thing to put somebody other than the Maple Leafs on at 7:00 Eastern time on the CBC once in a while.
Well, from a Roger standpoint, who's the one signing the checks, makes a lot more sense for them to hoard that one for themselves too, right? So,
well, I don't know if hoarding would be the way.
Oh, I would. My words, not yours.
Take another shot. Did Lou Lamoriello and the Islanders move quickly to get Patrick Roy in because they feared he might wind up in Montreal or Ottawa?
Not in Montreal. No way. Martin St. Louis is
he going to be the guy here? He's
the guy, man.
Through, and he'll be the guy that leads them into their next competitive cycle.
I think Martin St. Louis, and Jeff Gorton and the other Jeff have done a great job. I think they're a triumvirate. I don't see that changing one bit. Do I think that there was starting to be rumblings of Patrick Roy elsewhere? Yeah. But at the same time, the Islanders needed something, and it's funny. I had conversations during the game on Friday night against the Blackhawks saying, if Lane doesn't win tonight, he's done. So, and then the great thing about Lou is he is decisive. He knew who he wanted. He knew what type of person he wanted. He does have a real affinity for anybody coming out of the Montreal organization. He's always loved what the Canadians did for years and years and years, dating back to his time at Providence. So it shouldn't come to any surprise that Patrick Roy was at the top of his list.
I'm surprised it took as little time for Roy to get back in. I'm surprised it took as short for Corey Perry to get back in. Are you? Because to meet the qualifications, to have a terminated contract, and then for that guy to be back just, 2 months later.
After pledging to get counseling and help, right?
Yeah. So, I'm amazed it took as little as it did.
The key thing, first of all, Patrick Roy didn't get back in because a lot of people were very angry at him for the way he left Denver. The way he left the Avalanche in a lurch in August, just prior to the season starting. Jared Bednar, I think, had 6 weeks. I think a lot of people thought that he was a lone wolf and uncontrollable. And it took this time for people to accept that he could be controllable. And trust me, he's going to the manager in the National Hockey League that can control him. As far as Corey Perry, there, it didn't get very much press. It did get mentioned, but Corey Perry initiated an interview with the commissioner. Corey Perry went to New York and said, Gary, I'd like to talk to you because I think I understand what has happened. I understand why my contract was terminated, but whatever rehabilitation I needed to go through, I feel strongly that I have gone through it. I want you to understand my side of the story. And the commissioner came back and said, you can, Corey, I'm impressed with what you've done. And I have no reason to think that you can't come back and play. The moment that happened, I can guarantee you the phones at Newport started to ring and find a way to how to do it. And what, in the end, Corey Perry needed to do was find a franchise where there was a fit. And there is a fit in Edmonton. They do need depth players. They do need character players. And, I don't know when he's going to start playing. They also needed cheap players. And let's face it, Corey at this point is, playing on a minimum salary with bonuses. So from that perspective, this is a pretty good marriage. I thought Tampa would be the other place because of this guy has a really good reputation inside the dressing room as being a team player, someone who gives his all, someone who looks after his teammates. So from that perspective, I'm not surprised it happened as quickly as it has, Blake.
You got the heads up on the Rutherford extension. How long until we hear the same news on Patrick Allvin?
Well, yeah, the question is do they want to do it when the Canucks are on their All-Star break, or they want to do it when they come back and there are games and you can have a celebratory press conference? I don't think you want to do it. I don't think you want to do it next week when everybody's off.
Right. We won't be off. You won't be off. Until then, John Shannon.
This Sekeres and Price clip brought to you by Applewood Auto Group. And remember,
It's all good at Applewood.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?